Right, so we have our fabric folded over, and my fold is actually up here this time, but that's not necessary. Like, you can fold horizontally. My fold is up here just because from my previous video I made a pair of shorts from this fabric, and so the way my fabric is cut right now, this is the best way to fold to make sure that I'm making the best use of my fabric. So it doesn't mean that you have to fold it from the top. You can do a horizontal fold instead. But first of all, we're going to cut the main body of the top, and we're starting with the two front pieces. I also want to preface this video by saying it's been such a long time since I sew like a button down shirt or shirt dress or anything like that, so I feel like I've forgotten what I'm about to do. So honestly, I have my fingers crossed as I'm doing this whole thing, and I am hoping for the best right now. But yeah, let me see how much of the process I remember and how this whole thing turns out. So the first thing I'm going to do, I think, is to mark the length of my top, and I think I'm going to add just 1 inch to the length, and because of the way it's cut, I'm thinking maybe I don't need to add 1 inch, but I think I'm just going to add that 1 inch just in case, because like I always say, it's better for it to be too long than too short, too big than too small. You can always trim it off or like reduce it or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead right now, mark my full length, and then also I'm going to take out I'm going to mark out 1.5 inches all along like this center front right here. That would be like the button allowance thingy, because like it has the buttons in front, right? So I'm going to mark 1.5 inches for that. So 1.5 inches all the way here, and then my full length for the top all the way at the hem as well. Let's do it. All right, so I ended up marking 2 inches for the buttonhole thing because of how crinkly this fabric is, and I don't know, I think I might trim like just the very edge of the fabric here, so I decided to do 2 inches instead. So I think 1.5 is still fine if you're just using like regular like smooth fabric, because you can see this fabric is textured. So I don't know, everything is kind of moving around right now, and so yeah. But now that we have that, we have our center front line, and then we have our hem as well. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to mark my neckline. So for the width of the neck, for like shirts that have buttons, I feel like 3 inches width would be fine. And then this is the front, so I'm going 3 by 3, so 3 inches wide, 3 inches deep. All right, so here we have our neckline. Next up, I'm going to mark the shoulder span, or is that what you call it? The shoulder measurement anyway. And for most of my horizontal, I think actually all of my horizontal measurements with this, because it's very loose, very slightly oversized and a very loose top, I'm adding like a few extra inches of allowance to my horizontal measurements. So if you're going for a more like a less baggy fit, I would say be cautious of how much allowance you add. So for my shoulder width, for example, you take your shoulder to shoulder measurement, divide that by 2, and that is what you typically mark here. But I'm adding an extra inch to that, and then the width of the top, because it's not like it's just going to be straight down, right? So the width of the top, you take the widest part of your chest, you take that measurement, and then you add in however many inches of allowance that you think you would want for your shirt, depending on the fit that you're going for, like I said, and then you divide that by 4 and maybe add an inch for sewing allowance. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to mark my shoulder measurement first of all, and then I'm going to mark my armhole depth. Your armhole depth is your bust measurement divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So let's go ahead and do that. Now my shoulder slope, which is this point that I marked here, is 1.5 inches. So I would advise you use 1.5 inches, but I think you can also use an inch as well. So I marked that. So I'm going to connect that point to the edge of my neck right here. So it's going to be like a slanted line, and then from that point is where I have my armhole width. So from that point I marked my armhole measurements, and then I just extended that outwards. So on that extension, I'm going to take the bust measurement that I talked about earlier, and then with the allowance, and then divided by 4 plus sewing allowance. So that's what I'm going to mark on this point, and that is the measurement that I'm going to take and extend all the way down. So I'm also going to mark it at the hem, and then I'm going to connect those 2 points together with just a straight line. All right, so our top is coming together nicely. I hope I'm not speaking too soon. But so at this armhole right here, you can see that it has sort of just formed a sharp L shape. So at that sharp corner there, you want to just go ahead with your French curve and create like a curve right at the corner. I do not have a French curve, so I'm just going to freehand that. And then after that, I'm going to pin this all down, and just to make sure that nothing is moving around, and then I'm going to cut it out. And we're all done cutting this, so I'm going to use this to cut the back. I'm going to go ahead now and fold my fabric over and then place this on top of that, and we go from there. Right, okay, so now we have our front piece laid on this folded over fabric here, and you can see that, of course, because this is the back and it doesn't have any buttons, there's no need to have that button and buttonhole allowance. So I've sort of made sure to keep that out. As you can see here, that's why this extends out of the folded fabric. Now I also, at this top part here, left 2.5 inches of space from the top of the fabric here to where my shoulder starts at the front, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But the first thing that I'm going to do, if I remember correctly, is to start out with the hem. So I'm going to cut the hem, I'm going to cut the side, and then I'm going to sort of go into the armhole as well, and then I would just like extend it out this way because there's a step with the shoulder. So I'm going to do that and come back for the next step. Here we are. So you can see that, like, for the armhole, I followed the whole thing until this point where I just sort of shifted it out, and that's because of what I'm about to do now. So the next thing that we're going to do is to fold this over, and because the shoulder line is slanted, so it's also going to be a slanted thing. So I'm kind of trying to follow the line of the shoulder slope. So you can see that this perfectly aligns with that slant. So I'm just going to make sure it overlaps by a little over ½ inch. And then I'm just going to flatten that just a bit like that. And now I'm going to finish up the armhole. Okay, and then I'm also going to do the neck. So this is a bit tricky. Just going to cut this first. Okay, so now that I can see what I'm doing, I'm going to come down by 1 inch. Is that right? Wait, I think I'm going to come down by ½ inch first of all, and then just curve that. And sort of curve it into this. So it like follows the neckline of the front. So here's what it looks like. Now that we're done with the body of the shirt, next piece that we're going to cut are the 2 sleeves. So what I like to do for sleeves, I like to come here and measure what I have on the armhole, and I will note down whatever it is that I have there. So I'm just going to like measure from this point and curve my measuring tape and go all the way here. And that measurement, say for example we have maybe 10 inches there, keep that in mind. And then when it comes to my sleeves, I have my fabric folded over here. The first thing I usually measure is the length that I want my sleeves to be. So I'm going to measure my length right now. So this is going to serve as the hem of my sleeve. So I'm going to, this part right here is the part that is going to connect to like the armhole on the shirt. So and of course when you're measuring the length, you also want to add in either an inch or an inch and a half for sewing allowance, because you're going to sew this part to your shirt and then you're going to also hem this part. So always take that into account. Now that armhole measurement that we took from the shirt, mine is 12 inches. So I'm simply going to come and I'm going to start on the closed end right here, and I'm just going to sort of like freehand this shape, this armhole shape. So basically this shape that you can see here. And now I'm going to take my measuring tape and I'm going to measure and find where that 12 inches would be. So 12 inches stops here, and so I'm going to mark that, and then I'm going to come here and I would have already taken my arm measurement like around where the sleeve is supposed to stop. So I'm going to take that measurement, divide that by 2, of course adding in any allowance that I want. So depending on how loose or fitted this is supposed to be, adding all of that allowance and sewing allowance as well. And then I would mark that and connect that point to this point right here. Now that we've done all of that, this is what my sleeve looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and pin it all down and then cut it out. And of course I'm going to use this to cut my second sleeve because we need 2 sleeves. All right. Okay, so the last 2 pieces that we need to cut for this shirt would be the collar and then the, I don't know, I think kind of like a facing, right? which is what I'm trying to cut here, because with the type of collar, I think it's called a notched collar, with the type of collar slash neckline that we're doing, you want to be able to sort of when you don't have it buttoned up all the way, it would be able to kind of open like this, right? So you need to do a facing on the inside, and that's what I'm trying to cut now. So as you can see, I have about 6 inches wide for the whole thing, and so I'm just going to trace and cut this way and just like follow what I already cut for the shirt, right? So I'm just going to follow that, and I'm going to cut 2 pieces because there's 2 halves of the front, so they're going to be exactly the same thing. And I think I'm also going to use some interfacing on them to kind of reinforce them a little bit. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead now, cut the facing, and then we would cut the collar, then we can finally get to sewing, which is the fun part. Okay, with all of that done, these are all the pieces we have. So we have the body of our shirt, the sleeves, and the facing, and you can see how it's sort of, that's right there, the smaller piece on top is the facing. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is to join the front and the back by the shoulders, and then join them on the side seams as well. And I'm not cutting the collar now because I think I want to join those shoulders and then take the measurement of the neck before cutting the collar. So we're going to join the body of the shirt and then figure out the collar and the facing. Our shirt is coming together nicely. So we have the body of the shirt here, I've joined the shoulders and I've joined the side, and I think I'm going to trim off like just about 1/2 inch of the allowance that I have, because as you can see, like it overlays quite a bit. This is a bit wide, so I think I could trim off 1/2 inch here and 1/2 inch here. But yeah, this is what it looks like right now, and I'm feeling a bit more confident. So we're going to go ahead now to work on the collar. So I went ahead and trimmed off the 1/2 inch, and you can see it doesn't overlap as much anymore, which is exactly what we want. So for the collar, I think I'm going to measure what I have around the neck, but this collar doesn't have a collar stand first of all, and it doesn't, like, there's a bit of a gap, I would say maybe 1.5 inches before the collar starts, right? So you have a bit of a gap between the like end of the neck, like something like this, and then the collar starts, goes all the way around, and then another 1.5 inches, and it ends somewhere here. So I'm going to start at 1.5 inches and I'm going to measure and stop at 1.5 inches on this end. I hope that makes sense, but you'll see that in a moment. So I'm going to measure for that, and that measurement is what we're going to use to cut the collar. So now that I have my neck circumference, which is 20.5 inches, I'm going to keep that in mind as I cut. So I'm going to cut the 2 collar pieces one after the other. I'm going to cut the first one first, and then I'm going to use that to cut the second one, because I think it's better to cut this on a fold so that it would be symmetrical. Now for the height of the collar, I think 3 inches would be fine. So because we also need sewing allowance, I'm going to add in an extra inch for sewing allowance. So I'm going to mark 4 inches. So I'm just going to mark 4 inches, and I'm going to go like that all the way to the end first of all. So I have the collar marked out. I measured the 4 inches first of all, and then I measured that all the way here. That is the height that you can see, like this. And then at this point, how I got this line, I divided that neck circumference by 2, because as you can see, we are cutting this on a fold. So I divided that by 2, and then I added 1/2 inch for sewing allowance, and that was what I marked at that point. So I just extended that line like that, and then at the center right here, I came up by 1/2 inch. I marked that, and I connected that with this point right here. So it's sort of like a bit concave, right, because it's at its highest here at 1/2 inch, and it just sort of eases out until it connects to that point. So I've pinned it all down. I'm going to cut this out, and then I'm going to use this to cut the second collar piece. Here's what our collar looks like, both pieces, and I'm also going to use interfacing on just one of them. So the one that is actually going to be like at the front, the one that you would see when you like lay your collar down and wear the shirt, that is the piece that gets the interfacing. The other one is fine without it. I still have a little bit of fabric here, although they're like mostly scraps and pieces, but I'm thinking maybe I could just make like some front pockets, just because like this is very little fabric and I'm trying to do as little waste as possible. So I think that would be a good use for this fabric. But yeah, for the process for the pockets, I think I've already covered a lot on pockets in my videos on cargo pants, cargo sweatpants, and cargo shorts. So if you want to see like any, because I have inside pockets, that's the invisible pockets on the sides, I have patch pockets, that's the ones that just basically what I'm going to be doing here, and I have cargo pockets with the like So I will link those videos in the description box if you want to see any of those, because I for this particular project I won't be showing the process for the pockets. So next thing we're going to do, I think I'm just going to go ahead with my interfacing to iron that on one of the layers of my collar, and then on my facing for the neck and button area. So yeah, in the process of that, I think I'll just go ahead and attach my sleeves as well. So hold on. So for the sleeves, all I'm really doing is to sew that end closed and then sew it onto the armhole and then hem it. Like, it's pretty straightforward. I think the sleeves are the easiest part of this whole process for the shirts. But yeah, I will do all of that and I will be right back. Okay, so this is what our shirt looks like right now, which is really great. I love the pockets. I really love the pockets. But so I had mentioned earlier that I was going to use my interfacing on the on these pieces and then on one piece of the collar, but just because of how soft and really light this fabric is, I'm worried that if I do that, the collar and the facing might be too heavy on the shirt. So I've made the weird decision to not use interfacing. If you're using a different fabric though, I strongly advise that you do, but at this moment, honestly, I'm not even 100% sure that this is the right decision, but I'll see how this turns out, I guess. So the next thing that I'm going to do, you can see I've placed the facing where it's supposed to be, so I'm going to lay it down. There are two of them, so I'm going to do it on each side of the front of the shirt, lay it down like this, and just okay, I think I should start from the bottom actually. So all the way up here and then this way. I remember that when we're measuring around the neck, we left 1.5 inches here, so you want to stop just around that 1.5 inch mark because we need to attach the collar. So that's what I'm going to do on this side and on this side. So after doing that, I guess I would go to my collar pieces, and this fabric doesn't have a right and a wrong side, but just assume or just imagine that this part that you're looking at, the part that's facing the camera, is the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm going to sew this way, and that way, leaving this end open, and then I would turn it right side out and press it with my iron. I'm also going to turn this right side out after I've sewn it on, and I will press it as well, and then I will be back to show you the next steps. So let's go. We're basically rounding up right now. So I went ahead to sew on the facing and it's all good. I did the 1.5 inches here, like I said, and now here's my collar. So I marked the center of my collar, also marked the center of my neck, and so I pinned them together because you want to make sure that the collar is centralized and like nothing is lopsided or like anything like that. Now what we're going to do is to pin the collar down. I'm going to pin it down all the way to, like, it's going to get to this point right here where we stopped with the sewing of the facing, right? So it's going to get to this point. So I'm going to pin it down all the way there and then go ahead and sew it down. And while sewing, you're also going to sew, hold on, I think I should pin this so you get a better like description. Or basically just going to attach the collar and then sew the facing, the collar, the neck, like sew the whole thing together. And like at that point you can leave like the whole collar and the facing and all of that, but I would like to do a top stitch on my collar and down the like front of the button and buttonhole places. But let me pin the collar down and show you what that looks like. Hold on. So look, it already looks good. Like this is the look we're going for, so I'm really excited. But here's what I wanted to show you, right? So I pinned the collar down, and I also, when I got to where the facing starts, I also made sure to include the facing. So this is what I was trying to explain, right? So this is how it looks when it's all sewn up. So you can see that because the collar is sandwiched into the facing, you don't have any of those rough edges. So if you don't want to button it all the way up and you want to maybe undo like the first two buttons or something, this is how it would lay, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to sew the collar down, and then like I said, I want to top stitch. So I'm not like what you would see for like regular top stitching, which is just usually the lining piece and really close to the edge. But what I want to do is kind of like just maybe half an inch away from the seam. So I'm just going to sew a straight line going all the way here, this way, that way, all the way around the collar, and then the same thing out like this and down the front like that. So I'm just sewing with half an inch of a gap from this point to this point. So it's just something like that all the way around. And if I start it and I don't like it, I'm just going to undo the stitches, but I think that might look nice. So I'm going to sew down the collar, do my top stitching, and press the whole thing. Then all that would be left really is the buttons and buttonholes, and then hemming the bottom of the shirt itself, because we already hemmed the sleeves. So let's go. So this is what our shirt looks like. So I've done the whole top stitching thing. That's the seam that you can see here for the collar and then down. And I went ahead and marked where I want my buttons to be, and this is kind of what we have right now. So I don't think I'm going to put one up here, because that's just like, this is how the collar is supposed to look. So I think this is a good starting point. Now for women's shirts, the buttons are usually on the left side of the shirt. So I'm putting my buttons on the left side, and then on the right side would be for the buttonholes. So I'm going to sew in my buttons and then make sure I mark exactly where that is on this other side, so that I can do my buttonholes at the right points, because you don't want to make a mistake with that. So I'm just going to do my buttons and my buttonholes, and then finally do the last thing, which is to hem the bottom of the shirt, and I will show you what it looks like all done. Yeah. Outfit, or well, our finished top. The shorts I made in the previous video, so I would link that in the description box if you want to learn, if you want to see how I made this. But yeah, so it's a whole two-piece set, and I really love it. I love it so much. I can wear buttoned up like this, and then can also open up the buttons for just, I don't know, a different look, I guess, or wear it with like different bottoms, and then just the shirt open like this. I'm really proud of this one. Let me know what you think in the description box, and I will see you in my next video.